The story kicks off in Paris, where we see French police working closely with Scotland Yard. Their main focus? A woman named Elise. They're keeping her under constant surveillance, watching her every move for something suspicious. While Elise relaxes at a cafe, waiting for her food, a mailman unexpectedly walks up to her and hands her a letter. This immediately sends Scotland Yard into high alert mode, since this isn't part of her usual routine. As soon as the mailman steps out of the cafe, the authorities swoop in and arrest him. Now, about the letter, it's from Alexander Pierce, Elise's former lover. He gives her specific instructions: catch a train to Venice, find someone who resembles him, and trick the authorities into believing that person is him. Meanwhile, another mysterious figure, someone not connected to the cops, seems to be keeping tabs on Elise as well. Calm and collected, she burns the letter in the cafe's fireplace and heads off toward the train station. The French police, under Scotland Yard's orders, scramble to follow her, but Elise times her boarding so perfectly that she's the last one to get on the train, leaving her pursuers in the dust. Back at Scotland Yard, the team interrogates the mailman they just apprehended. The lead inspector, who's tasked with catching Pierce, is convinced that Pierce has undergone plastic surgery and is now disguised as the mailman. However, his boss dismisses this idea, mocking him for wasting resources on the wrong guy. To make matters worse, the boss points out how the operation has already cost more than Pierce's theft, hinting that they're nearing the end of their patience. Following the letter's instructions, Elise is now on the train looking for someone with a similar build and height as Pierce. After a bit of searching, she ends up sitting across from Frank, an American tourist engrossed in a spy novel. Frank is instantly captivated by her charm. The two engage in a lighthearted conversation that ends with Elise agreeing to join him for dinner. While they're enjoying their meal, Scotland Yard catches up and starts monitoring them. They snap a photo of Frank, mistakenly believing he could be Pierce, and send his image to their headquarters. But soon enough, they realize it's just a false lead. Frank is simply a regular guy, and they decide to drop the operation. When the train pulls into Venice, Elise invites Frank to join her on a boat ride to the luxurious Hotel Daniele. They check into a lavish suite that had been pre-arranged by Pierce, and Elise introduces Frank as her husband to the hotel staff. After settling in, the pair heads out for another dinner. During the meal, Elise admits that her heart belongs to someone else, which visibly dampens Frank's spirits. Despite this, they continue discussing her mysterious ex-lover before returning to the hotel. Back in their suite, Elise finds an invitation to a ball, seemingly from Pierce. This further upsets Frank, who's already feeling a bit sidelined. Later that evening, Frank compliments Elise, leading to a brief but passionate kiss on the balcony. Unbeknownst to them, this moment is being photographed by the men tailing Elise. Afterward, they head to their separate rooms for the night, much to Frank's disappointment. As he dreams about Elise, morning arrives, and he's awakened by hotel staff bringing breakfast. When he goes to check on Elise, he discovers she's gone. Suddenly, things take a dangerous turn. Armed men break into Frank's hotel room, calling him Alexander. Completely baffled, Frank realizes he's in serious trouble. Acting quickly, he locks himself in the bathroom and escapes through the window, with the men hot on his trail. Frank darts across rooftops and narrowly avoids capture, only to be caught by Italian police. He tries to explain that he's being mistaken for someone else, someone Elise is involved with. At first, the police think he's lying to avoid assault charges and lock him up. However, a twist comes when one of the officers pulls Frank out of jail, confirming that his story checks out. The men chasing him are Belarusian criminals who have placed a bounty on Pierce's head, thinking Frank is him. But this officer isn't exactly on Frank's side. He hands him over to the Belarusians to collect the reward money. Now fully aware of the peril he's in, Frank's situation seems hopeless until Elise appears out of nowhere in a boat. She rescues him just in time, and the two speed away together. The escape is anything but smooth. The criminals open fire on them as they weave through Venice's canals. The chase is intense, with the attackers getting dangerously close, but Elise's quick thinking helps them get away. Once they're safe, Frank demands answers. Elise confesses that everything happening to him is because she made the police believe he was Pierce. Pierce, it turns out, is a wanted man who stole $2 billion from a dangerous criminal named Shaw. On top of that, he's also being hunted by the British government for tax evasion. Shaw's reputation is terrifying. Known for his ruthlessness, he once murdered his wife's lovers before turning on her as well. When Frank asks why Pierce would risk crossing someone like Shaw, Elise simply shrugs and says that's just how Pierce operates. He's fearless, no matter the odds. Frank was completely floored when he learned the truth, but he stood his ground, saying he didn't regret kissing Elise for a second. Elise, feeling guilty, apologized for dragging him into her messy situation and managed to get him off the boat. Before she left, Frank confessed his love for her, but Elise brushed it off with a bittersweet comment. Maybe, in some alternate reality, they could have been together. She sailed away, leaving Frank to watch her disappear into the distance. Not long after, Elise made her way to a government facility. Turns out she's actually a British spy. There, she met up with Atchison, another agent who had been tailing her back in Paris. Elise had been on a mission to go undercover and get close to Pierce, but somewhere along the way, she fell for him and went AWOL. Now, she's ready to get back on track and help Atchison catch Pierce, though it's clear she's more concerned about preventing anyone else from getting hurt. Atchison, however, wasn't buying it. He saw right through her. She was doing all of this because her feelings were shifting, this time toward Frank, the American math teacher. Elise's next step was to attend a grand ball, wearing a wire, as Pierce had invited her there. During the event, a mysterious man, the same one from Paris, slipped her a letter. It was from Pierce, giving her directions to find him. As Elise prepared to leave, hoping to track down the man who delivered the letter, possibly Pierce himself, Frank suddenly showed up and stopped her. He'd followed his heart all the way there and wasn't about to let her go. The two ended up sharing a dance, but Elise kept things blunt. She admitted she liked Frank, but he was just a pawn in this elaborate scheme. She told him he'd served his purpose and wasn't needed anymore. Frank, however, wouldn't back down. Atchison's men took things into their own hands and grabbed Frank, detaining him while Elise pressed forward in her search for Pierce. Frank was held in custody, with the agents toying with him a bit before letting him know he'd stay locked up until the mission was done. Meanwhile, Elise followed the instructions from the letter and arrived at a specific address by boat, with Atchison keeping a close eye on her. She stopped at the location and entered a building, only to walk right into a trap set by Shaw, a dangerous gangster. Through a live video feed, Atchison and his team watched as Shaw confronted Elise. Shaw was fuming, accusing Pierce of stealing from him and claiming that Pierce had taken not just his money, but a piece of his soul. He threatened to kill Elise unless she revealed the location of the safe where the stolen money was supposedly hidden. Elise, however, insisted she had no idea where the money was. Shaw didn't take kindly to that response and began to physically intimidate her, but she stayed firm. Atchison's interpreter translated Shaw's angry Russian. He was planning to kill Elise if Pierce didn't show up. Despite having snipers in position, Atchison refused to act, confident that Pierce would eventually appear to save Elise. As Shaw's threats escalated, Elise finally broke and revealed the safe's location. Shaw found the safe, but it required a code to open. When he asked Elise for the code, she told him she didn't know it. Things took a darker turn as Shaw threatened her again. Frank, still in custody, watched in horror through the live feed. Realizing Atchison wouldn't step in to save Elise, Frank managed to pick the lock on his handcuffs and escape to help her, leaving a frustrated Atchison behind. Frank made a bold move, pretending to be Pierce himself. Elise, terrified for his safety, begged him to stop. Ignoring her pleas, Frank told Shaw he'd hand over the money as long as Elise was released unharmed. Shaw was skeptical since Frank's demeanor didn't match Pierce's reputation, but he decided to test him. He demanded that Frank open the safe, warning that Elise would pay the price if he failed. With tension running high, Elise whispered, "I love you," as Frank approached the safe and pretended to input the code. Before Frank could finish, Chief Inspector Jones made a decisive call and ordered the snipers to take their shot. The snipers took out Shaw and his men in an instant, and both Frank and Elise escaped unscathed. Atchison was left stunned, unable to believe Pierce didn't come to the rescue. Back at the scene, Jones reprimanded Atchison for risking Elise's life and informed her that her suspension was lifted, but she was also fired. Meanwhile, Atchison received word that Pierce had supposedly been captured. As the chaos subsided, Elise and Frank shared an emotional moment. Frank asked if she had feelings for both him and Pierce. Hesitantly, Elise admitted she did. Frank responded with a surprising revelation. In a shocking twist, he proved he was actually Alexander Pierce by entering the correct code for the safe. It turned out Pierce had undergone plastic surgery to create a new identity for himself as Frank. Meanwhile, the man authorities thought was Pierce confessed he was just a paid stand-in, a regular tourist hired to play the part. He'd been receiving anonymous messages and payments to carry out specific tasks, with no idea who was behind them. Atchison was completely thrown off by this new development. When the safe was finally opened, a banker's check for £744 million was found inside, representing the amount Pierce owed in back taxes. With the money recovered, Jones called off the operation. Atchison tried to argue that Pierce was still wanted in several countries, but Jones dismissed his concerns. With Shaw dead, there was no longer a pressing need to pursue Pierce. Elise and Frank, now free to be together, boarded a boat with the recovered money. As they set sail down the river, they left behind all the danger and deception, ready to start their life anew. The end.